Did George Washington, in his farewell address, foresee some of the issues that we're experiencing in the Ukraine-Russo war? I think so. We'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about how free speech did not cause the rise of Nazi Germany, some Antichrist pop culture, and of course, we're going to have some fun with the Ballad of Elmer. We're going to talk about Elmer McCurdy. Look him up if you are watching this live, and you're going to have an interesting story. And Nikki knows facts, and then of course we're going to be doing chapters 3 and 4 of The Great Divorce in the Book Corner. Howdy, Jonathan Fiala for Further Every Day. Right now, I'm joined in studio by Steve. How's it going?
Man, it is going fantastic, John Arthur. I've had a great week. Things are going to go politically incorrect.
As always.
As always, my man.
Charlie and Nikki are late, but this is now a live show.
And the water will be warm downstream.
I don't want to know about the water downstream of you. And of course, in the producer's seat is Rai, the producer guy. Thank you for being here, bud.
My pleasure.
And so, like I said, Charlie and Nikki, they'll be here in just a little bit. They're running a tad late. They had something important to take care of. But I want to jump into Washington's farewell address. And again, we're doing a little bit of a overview of our founding history. For those of you who are just now joining us, by the way, if you are our regular listeners and you've been around for a long, long time, we are now live on Sundays at 2 Eastern, 1 Central, every Sunday on the PSB on DLive, Vaughn.com, and of course, Rumble. So we'll try to take your chats whenever possible. Join us there. Thank you for being there on YouTube and Rumble. Further Every Day on YouTube and Rumble, and anywhere podcasts are found, hundreds of thousands of downloads. We are so grateful for that over the last 3 years. So we're doing a bit of a introspective or a retrospective on the founding, and we're looking through letters, notes, addresses, and some of the stuff that was put out by our founding fathers and how it relates to our world today. Washington's farewell address is where we're going to be today. And I think Washington actually did foresee a lot of the problems that we are now witnessing in the Russo-Ukrainian conflict as far as America's interests being tied up into a war that is not our own. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the Ukraine. Some people have really forgotten what the world was like just 5-6 years ago and how the Russo-Ukraine war, it didn't just start when Putin invaded, by the way, wrongly invaded the Ukraine. This is a thing that has been going on for a long, long time. I'm just going to address the elephant in the room. Charlie and Nikki just got here. Come on in. You guys just come on in. So this is Nikki sitting in the chair of theology. How's it going?
Good.
Yours truly sitting in the chair of philosophy. Charlie is finally here. How is it going?
Great.
Have him in culture, and then Steve is in politics, because that's how your logic flows. Your logic flows from your theology to your philosophy to your culture and to your politics. These two seats do switch
as it
sometimes.
flows downstream.
You definitely like downstream. I'm going to always be upstream of you for good reasons. Moving on to the farewell address, Mr. Producer, if you can stop laughing, throw up cut number 1 for me, please. I went ahead and actually went through this, and I want to kind of summarize these, but first we're going to read. So the period for a new election of a citizen to administer the executive government of the United States being not far distant, and the time actually arrived when your thoughts must be employed in designating the person who is to be clothed with that important trust, it appears to me proper, especially as it may conduce to a more distinct expression of the public voice, that I should now apprise you of the resolution that I have formed to decline being considered among the number of those of whom this choice is to be made. Now, Washington was built differently than what you see and hear now in the world. This is his very, very eloquent way of saying, I want to let you know, I'm not going to be running for re-election for a 3rd term. I have served 2, and I think it's a good idea that you start to look elsewhere. And of course, we know history tells us that John Adams was elected. That was a pivotal change. Everyone expected George Washington to become a monarch or a despot. His worst enemy is a despot. And even the King of England said if George Washington actually relinquishes his seat as president, he will be one of the greatest men of history. It's almost a word-for-word quote from the King of England, who so hardly fought to keep the territory that Washington took from him. So this was a strange appearance. This is you got to remember, take your 21st century mindset off for a moment. And what you'll see here is something that is really beautiful. Washington is abdicating his throne. Very new concept. And in doing so, he's going to also provide the opportunity for it to happen again. And now, if I can summarize the next couple of paragraphs that he lays out, I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve, he says, effectively, but I need to step down. And let me tell you why I've resolved to do so. I've only served 2 terms, and that's really enough. I'm going to retire. I'm going to go home, as every president should. And
I wish there were some politicians that would do that.
Oh, please, yes.
Well, that's why we have the argument of term limits, right?
Yeah. And let me just interject one thing here. And I think our listeners would probably agree with this for the most part. Term limits is a very good thing. And self-induced term limits is great, but legal term limits would be even better. We've got people that have been in our halls of Congress for way too long.
Yes, we need that in the House of Representatives. We need that in the Senate. There needs to be term limits. The only problem is they're not going to vote for term limits for themselves. They get in there, and they're in there for so many years, become dinosaurs, and it's almost like they lose touch. We know that we're very conservative people here, and we know that there are some conservative people that have been in politics for so long that they're really not champion the conservative way anymore. They're entrenched.
And so the first time that you and I did anything on air together was when I was on radio here in Houston. And I actually had you debate my father on term limits as one of my first shows. I think it was my first show of When Opinions Go.
How did he do?
Charlie did fine. He did fine.
I thought I held my ground.
Hey,
yeah.
So Ryan, these are the first that we put these on. These are really loud. You turn ours down just
Turn
a
their
little.
monitors down. So they're
Just
in
a
ears.
little.
No, not them. They're in ears on your
Yes.
far right. The knobs, the pots.
Sorry, guys, we're doing a little technological.
We weren't
update.
here
So-
for the beginning. So.
These two didn't mic
Where
check, and they
did you
plugged
get
in new headphones. So yeah, sorry guys. But all that to say, there was something new happening here, and I do believe that term limits are in of themselves are unconstitutional on their face. But I do think that there is an ill there. If we would only do what we were supposed to do as an electorate and actually elect good representatives and hold them accountable, I think it would be a lot easier. But you now have this rampant fraud that has become a problem in the last decade.
Yep.
And you've got counties that are showing up 117% for Barack Obama in 2014, I believe, 2012 rather, for re-election. And then there were some in 2014 that had similar numbers in Florida, where you have a strictly Republican district showing out 117% for the Democrat.
But to circle back to Washington, I've always kind of debated whether Washington was the best president or if it was Lincoln. And
It was not Lincoln.
I was going to say, I think I've really started to move firmly into the George Washington camp. And not because he was first, but because of his ability to speak and influence, but also because of his wisdom. He's stepping down, and he's clearly, everybody would love for him to stay doing what he's doing.
Yep.
That's really what they wanted. And he said, no, this is not good for us. This is not the right thing. And this is why this is where self-imposed term limits by people in Congress would really earn a lot more respect, because we don't need one person for millennia. Thank you, Mitch McConnell.
Pelosi, McConnell, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Graham.
we could just go on
the Forever Wars crowd. And again, I do think that there's a certain amount of graft that's going on there, and that's why they stay.
Yeah.
So what you see is a model of a good statesman here. But to move further forward, Washington then goes on to articulate this. Mr. Producer, if you could pull this up. But as it is easy to foresee that from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth, as this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously, directed. It is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness. What does he mean by that? And for put it in layman's terms, by the way I get through these is I always go and I word for word replicate in my own words what some of these older documents, people who are much wiser, much more eloquent, much smarter than I write. Be wary of forces that seek to weaken the national unity essential to the defense, both internal and external, ideologically and materially, i.e., think about the communist Marxist thought process. Think about the nations like Ukraine that wish to tap us dry. So DEI, all of these thoughts, which again, part of the cultural Marxist idea that you have to provide equity. These are things that will destroy you from the inside out. And as we talked about in previous episodes, you look at Shays Rebellion, you look at the Newburgh conspiracy. There were people who said, I deserve more because the Brits left this behind. Even though so-and-so owned it, the collective deserves more because we all fought. And that is where our nation really goes array and wrong. But you see that they are trying to do this all the way back then. The same spirit still exists. So, and he goes on, and again, just to sum up his thoughts a little bit further, my notes here, the only means for continued freedom is national unity and individual solidarity in the bonds of creed, blood, and nationality. Yeah. You have to have the same beliefs. And that's something that I think you were alluding to a moment ago, is you have these other beliefs that are now creeping in, and it's ripping the country in two. Yeah.
Internally, especially in the Defense Department and taking care of DEI, you cannot be a strong army. You cannot have a strong defense with these policies in place. The transgender go into the service and then they have their surgeries and they're on medication for the rest of their life. They cannot serve in a military form. They cannot go to war. So
how can body dysmorphia, someone with such severe crippling body dysmorphia that we do irreparable harm to their body, how are they mentally fit? It used to be that if someone had anxiety,
yes,
we would say, wait a minute.
Oh.
You're not a frontline troop, because the moment you get PTSD, forget about the battlefield for one moment. Just think about the person.
Yeah,
think about how much damage is.
Well, even glucose intolerant, you can't go on the front lines. Well, why do I want to take somebody into the defense department, into the military, pay them money, and not be able to use them when I have to defend the country? Mm-hmm. That just does not make any sense at all. In DEI, why would I promote somebody based on their race or their sex if they don't have the qualifications? I am not in a strong position. I am in a weaker position. And so I have just internally put myself closer to the enemy's hands.
Indeed. And so some people have just popped in with the chat here. Someone said this. This is from Roxy. I want the average Americans to represent the average Americans, not lawyers who get big PAC cash to do the bidding of their sponsors. I do think that PACs should be worn like jerseys or NASCAR, track
endorsements,
where you have the endorsements plastered all over them. Babylon Bee just recently did a funny thing where they said, They're going to put barcodes on politicians so they can be scanned by lobbyists, as they're buying their politicians. I think that there's actually a little bit of value in actually knowing, because like I'll speak to a race here in Houston. There was a race for the Harris County GOP committee chair. This individual, not the current, this is a while back. This individual raised more money than had ever been seen before in Harris County, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it all came out of a Democrat PAC in Dallas.
Wow.
Ultimately, a Democrat-leaning adjacent PAC out of Dallas. And so you wonder why Texas is having a hard time becoming purple. It's because we're putting ineffectual leaders in at our grassroots level and at our local party chair position. We don't have that problem right now. Harris County has a great party chair. Love Cindy. She's amazing. But all of that to say, you see that corrupt influence and corrupt money's come in. So I absolutely agree with you, Rocky.
Texas politics are it's very difficult right now.
Very interesting.
We're not that conservative.
No.
We definitely need to get that fixed. So anyway, what you see is a direct correlation between Washington's goal in creating this new nation and stepping aside and saying, I'm going to make sure that I peacefully transfer this power over. It's a beautiful thing. And then he goes on to say, you need to have a national unity. So next slide, if you would, Mr. Producer. He goes on to say, citizens by birth or by choice of a common country, the country has a right to concentrate your affections. I just want to pause there. The country has a right. The country of your origin or of your decision has a right to your affections. That is a wild statement in 21st century America, because we hear it is okay to hold on to your country of origin and hold it higher than the one to which you've immigrated. No. If you want citizenship in the United States of America, you will be American. And it's such a shift. I remember there is a Disney flick from the 1960s, The Happiest Millionaire. And the extended cut, there's an Irishman. He says, I'll always be Irish. A fact I won't deny. I'll always be Irish, always hold my head up high. But when it comes to, I can't remember the whole thing, but he says, I'll be truly American as Casey at the bat. When all that's said and done, I came from Ireland, but I've come here. I have come to this nation. I have made my home. I am now an Irish American, American being prime. That's something that, it's like, yes, that's my blood and my makeup, but I've decided to immigrate. I've decided to become an American. Where is that today? It's missing.
Speaking about Disney flicks, that one that you're going to be talking about later is like,
well, hey, let's save that for let's save that for
I'm not
later.
saying a word. I'm just saying that.
All right, Mr. Producer, Steve is wandering.
Blew me off the racks. I'm just kind of throwing something out there for you folks to hang around. Okay.
Thank you.
It's going to be good.
Cut 3, Mr. Producer, please go and bring it back up. So just to continue that, okay. It has the right to your affections. The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than the appellation derived from local discriminations. With slight shades of difference, you have the same religion, manners, habits, political principles. You have in a common cause fought and triumphed together. The independence and liberty that you possess are a work of the joint counsels and joint efforts of common dangers and sufferings and successes. You got to remember, America was paid for in blood. This nation that people want to spit on, they want to say that you can burn the flag. That flag was won with many patriots' lives. And that's something that it's something that was instilled to me as a youth, but I think we've really missed giving that to the general millennial population and the Gen Zs. And Gen Alpha, I have no idea what's going to happen with them. You have this Marxist ideology infiltrating the schools, and unfortunately, it's only going to get worse unless we really push. And right now, in 2025, February, we're 1 month into the Trump presidency, the second term. We need to know why we believe what we believe. We need to know where we need to go in 4 years, or we're going to miss it.
I think one thing that that is good right now is that the term that's really being used by the Trump administration is common sense. And I think when you look at some of these things, they are absolutely common sense, which is surprising that some Democrats don't see some of the common sense. I'm not talking about, I'm going to call it the micro way to approach things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the macro things. Why would you not want to close your border? That's simple. Why would you not want to cut waste? That doesn't take any thinking. If you don't want to pay as much in taxes, well, then let's get rid of some of the expenditures. In this case, some of the waste. That's what I'm kind of talking about. The other thing that comes to my mind here, though, as we're talking through this, and I've never thought about this before. Is it possible that people have dual citizenship without being recognized as having dual citizenship? I.e.,
all the time.
Yeah, the Ilhan Omars. I mean that.
Oh,
I don't know if she is a dual citizenship though. Do we know that?
You know what?
She
I
came here.
stand question on that. But the point being,
But she definitely has an allegiance. She came into
Yes,
this country.
that's what I'm getting at.
And ultimately, she violated many of the laws. Some of them, the laws of nature, marrying her own brother. And now she's making a mockery of the nation.
yeah.
So
I don't know. Didn't she come here as a child with her family?
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because A, it's not in line with this. B, I don't have that in front of me. So, chat, you
That's
give us some
something we need to
research
look
and
at.
pull it up.
But the point
check
that you
this.
made is exactly where I wanted to go. She is dissing the country so bad, and she's
Yeah.
not the only one.
Yeah.
And so you have to ask the question, where is your allegiance?
right.
What do you align to? And I used to be one that thought that dual citizenship was not. It was neither good nor bad. No, it's bad.
I agree, Charlie.
It's
I agree.
bad, and it's all because, and it's coming to fruition now. When you have your allegiance to one that is now in direct opposition to the other, you're going to have to pick a side.
The biggest issue with
Exactly.
Omar is her allegiance to her religion,
Yes.
and there's nothing wrong with that if your
Have at
religion
it.
is compatible with the United States of America. But this one isn't. I'm sorry, it's not. So someone says here, this is Roxy, says there's no definitive evidence that she holds dual citizenship. So,
Thank you,
so just-
and I appreciate the correction there.
yeah, fact check us. Fact check us anytime. But just moving back on to what Washington was saying, he actually does address some of this later on, and I actually want to get to that. So if you can bring up the next cut, Mr. Producer. This government, the offspring of our choice, uninfluenced and unawed, adopted upon full investigation and mature deliberation, completely free of it in its principles in the distribution of its powers, uniting security with energy and containing within itself a provision for its own amendment, you have legal remedies, just saying, has a just claim to your confidence and your support, respect for its authority, compliance with its laws, acquiescence in its measures are duties enjoined by the fundamental maxims of true liberty. The basis of our political system is the right of people to make and to alter the constitutions of government. So we can employ term limits. We can employ, but the thing is, we have to do it through the system that is laid
Yes.
up before us.
Yep.
And just not to be pedantic, but when people say, oh, Trump can't, you have a legislative. That is what says what you can and cannot do. You have a judicial, which says, does this fit within the realm of the legislative? And then you have an executive branch. What does it do? It executes the law. So can Trump do what he's doing? Well, Biden sure did, but that's not an excuse.
Right.
Actually, yes, if it's within the law. And Trump, by the way, I don't have the cut handy, but he did say this last week or so, someone said, are you going to abide by the courts? He goes, I always abide by the courts. I'm going to appeal it. And I'm going to appeal it if I have to again. He shouldn't have to, by the way. The judge that's doing this, judges only have judicial immunity as long as they are in good standing. That means that their oath of office hasn't been broken. There's an argument to be made that several judges in the last 2 or 3, 5 years have broken their oath of office. If you can prove that precedent, by the way, you can prosecute a judge. Most judges, little known secret, most judges don't want to be prosecuted, especially if it shows that their oath of office has been violated.
Yep.
If you can prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt and they know,
That sends a chill.
Especially
a lot of them will disbench themselves.
especially a federal judge.
So you want to be able to bring the goods. If you ever go against a judge on that for malfeasance, judicial malfeasance, there are ways that you can. Judicial immunity only holds as long as they are within good standing of the law. They haven't violated their oath of office. Now, that's a whole nother conversation, and my father's a really good resource on that. He has actually been on PSB a couple times as a guest. That's a rabbit hole. But you do have remedies. We do have remedies for judicial malfeasance. That is a serious option that's available. Ms. Nikki, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say that today there are some people who actually think the judges can override the president. I mean, they really do. And they can't. They have to uphold the law. The claims against the president is that he's not within his jurisdiction or within the law, but he is the executive branch. So,
Well, and I think to your point, which is well made, you've got judges that have put some stays, some temporary stays. Why is it? Because they do disagree with Trump
And-
unequivocally, but they know at the end of the day
they can't.
they can't.
And you know, I'll be honest with you. I'm okay for them to say, let's put a hold on you firing all these people. And the reason I'm okay with that is saying, let's just examine that we're not going over and above, and these people do have rights. But that is a temporary restraining order. That's not telling them they cannot release these people or lay these people off or fire them or whatever. And so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm not okay if they come back and say, you cannot fire the head of this agency.
Of course you can. It's in the executive branch. What are you doing even speaking? I think Trump has the right to just say, I'll see you in court. They're fired. He has the right to say that. Now, I think politically, he is trying to maneuver, and I think there might be some value in that. And the good thing is that it is going to go through the court system. It is going to get appealed to some level. But in the case of imminent emergency, he does have the executive right. Mm-hmm. It's clear that he does, and it would be found out in court, but that's neither here nor there.
We're getting back to George Washington.
We're getting back there. And actually, Trump, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, Trump is very Washingtonian in his understanding of the Constitution. I think there's some really cool stuff coming out of this Russo-Ukraine deal that he's trying to do. Mm-hmm. It's actually really quite brilliant, and it feels Washingtonian towards the end of his speech, which we'll get to in just a moment. But for now, let's talk about what Washington was afraid of. He was afraid of breaking the system. And to break the system, here's how he laid out people might go about it. All obstructions to the execution of the laws, all combinations and associations under whatever plausible character with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or awe the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities are destructive of this fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. They serve to organize faction, there's that word again, special interests, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of the party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority in the community. Did Washington foresee what we're dealing with today?
I think Washington experienced what we were dealing with today. Yes, he did.
Walked it. He saw it. He walked it, and he talked it, and he knew. He knew. And he speaks more about parties. But before we get there, constitutional amending. He speaks here, towards the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to its acknowledged authority, but also that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles. Don't monkey with what works, however spacious or the pretext. One method of assault may be to the effect, in the forms of the Constitution, alterations which impair the energy of the system and thus to undermine what cannot be directly overthrown. Do I hear packing the Supreme Court?
The word there is undermined. Undermine the law.
Don't mess with a good thing. You got to understand something. We just went through the Articles of Confederation. We just got out of that. And we're moving into this new thing in Washington saying, guys, we spent years, half a decade, working on this Constitution, hammering it out, beating it out, building something that made sense and that actually used real world examples of other republics. If you have to amend it, do so at your own hazard. If you want to interfere, make sure that it's not to progress your own agenda, because eventually your children will suffer the unforeseen negative consequences, the perverse consequence that comes from you messing with the structure. Yet what do we see today? We see parties, we see factions, special interests, trying to mess and monkey with the structure of the Constitution. This is something that we are dangerously close to. We are one election away from throwing away everything that works. It's a perfectly serviceable system. Why amend it if you can avoid it? Because once you start, it doesn't stop.
Yeah, I was going to say, you talk about three things that would go away. The packing of the Supreme Court, that would happen. You would have a situation where the 60% majority in the Senate doesn't matter. I think one of the worst things that Harry Reid did when he was Speaker of the Senate, when it came to the picks, court picks, and I believe, I'd have to double check this, but he started out with the Supreme Court. He just willy-nilly said, we're going to do majority vote. And that, to me, was a damaging thing. The Senate has a very different type of role compared to the House, and a lot of people don't understand that. And getting rid of that 60%, to me, was a dangerous thing. Third thing, when you look at government as a whole, you undermine these things, and you're on the precipice of things that you don't really want to see, and you can't get back. Mm-hmm. And I think your point about we're one election away, I think if Kamala Harris had been elected, our country would be radically different right now.
And we always say that, but
it's not to instill fear.
We're looking at a radically different country.
Yeah.
Like, so I remember I was sitting in the Trump Hotel in November of 2020, sitting with a friend of mine, Patrick Byrne, and we were chatting, and he says, if they win 2 years, it'll take 2 years for this nation to fall apart. And I said, maybe. It's scary. And he goes, but look at they're burning everything down. Here's the one reason why he was wrong, why he and I were wrong. It's a really good system.
It is.
And it's amazing how much punishment it can take, but it's frightening how close we're becoming to becoming a former nation.
Think about how different things would be if we didn't have the Electoral College.
Oh, it would be a mess.
Well, I think it's... Go ahead, Steve.
Sit here and think, here's people that just fought this war being ruled by kings or monarchy. They're thinking about what they came out of, how they were ruled, all of the oppression that they had during this time, what they couldn't have, what they couldn't do, what they couldn't say, all of this. Now they're thinking, what can we do to improve this system? Everybody's got these ideas, all these great ideas. And then you got some of these people that are over here. Hey, but we want this. Squeak, 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 squeak. The squeaky wheel. Mm-hmm. But we want this. Squeak, squeak, squeak. But here's all of these other people, these going, hey, but we want what's best for everybody.
Yeah,
benefits the whole.
Yeah, you had some.
For the whole.
Yeah, you had some that were really looking at their own state. And you had what they called the Tories. They
Correct.
never had really broken their affection toward the motherland,
Correct.
England. And so these were some of the, and the fact, take into consideration of the Tories, they were still the affection to England. They did not have the affection for America. And these are the point that Washington is trying to make, is he's saying, you got to love this country. We got to be unified. We got to make, I mean, George Washington, out of anybody, understands the frailty of the Union, of what they just
built.
Yes.
He knew how fragile the Constitution was.
Yes, he did.
And I think
it's a new idea.
It was, but I also think that he really believed in it as well.
Yeah.
He knew that it just needed time, and it wasn't so much for him, it was for others.
Yes.
Yep. And the articles were a good start. They were actually a good start for a wartime
Yes, I would agree.
union. For a wartime union, I think they really started off on the right foot. But he goes on to say, here are some of the things that will harm the Constitution. Mr. Producer, if you can pick up. I have already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state, with particular reference to the founding of them on geographical discriminations, which were the primary estate at the time. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you of the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. This spirit, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature. There they go, referencing the fallen nature of man. Having in its roots in the strongest passions of the human mind, it exists under different shapes in all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed. But in those of popular form, it is seen in its greatest rankness and is truly their worst enemy. He's speaking to the democratic process of electing representatives. Still, even though it's not a democracy, it's still risky. It's still prone to mankind's fallen nature. And again, I think Washington actually would rather have a benevolent dictatorship monarchy. I think he would rather have that if you could choose the right person every single time. In every case. By the way, in a way, that is actually a representation of heaven. That's why communism sounds so good to us. It is a man-made utopia heaven, dare I say. It's an attempt at replicating. That's all that Satan does. He tries to replicate that which he cannot create from scratch, except it always ends up in the worst of human tragedies because of how evil man is at his core. You will see invariably a failure of that benevolent dictator. So that's why we rotate them. So Washington here is speaking to the nature of man and how it's just going to fall apart. Moving one more. The alternate dominion of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, in itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, and sooner or later the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation and ruins the public liberty. Guys, this is exactly what we were just saying. What Washington is laying out here is how a republic falls. And it falls when the parties start to mess with the system. They start to destroy something that is working. When it is working well, there's no reason to tear it down, but rather to amend or to re-elect. That's our remedy. That's one of the reasons, one of the few arguments I have against term limits is that it really should be the people. And we're starting to see that. I am very, very more neutral, maybe even positive term limits now that I've seen. Someone said it in the chat. They said they didn't foresee fraud with voting machines. I think they saw fraud. I think they were worried about fraud, but nowhere near the level that we see today. We've institutionalized these voting machines that are networked, which should never have occurred. It should never have been the case that we would have had network machines.
Amen. I couldn't agree more on that.
Yep.
That to me, the issue of voting in securing an election is really not that difficult. Now, I say that, and there are some challenges, no doubt. But to me, how is it that you've got a system that has all the Social Security numbers in the United States and you don't understand where they live? I don't understand that. That's number one. Number two, how is it that you cannot make sure that that Social Security number does not vote more than once?
Mm-hmm.
I don't get that. You can live in 25 different states all year long. I don't care.
They know if you don't pay your taxes.
Well, hello. Yeah. You know. So to me, the issue of not being able to, and by the way, folks, I'm going extreme here, but what I'm saying is we can make our elections much more secure than what they are. There is no way that there should be fraud committed within our voting systems. It just should not happen.
Well, maybe now that we have Elon Musk looking over things, maybe he can give some intelligent direction.
Well, and I think that goes to the heart of the issue of the deep state.
That's
Correct. And it says, Tim just dropped this in. He says a thumb drive can change the whole tally every time. That is absolutely true of the 2020 Dominion
Yep.
machines.
Yep.
And I do believe that there was an addendum. They said they fixed it. I don't buy it. I am very concerned. They said that they fixed it. Here in Houston, in Harris County, we have something called the Hart InterCivic system, which is probably the most advanced system. I really do like it. The fact of the matter is it is secure. It is non-networked. Okay, secure, non-networked. It has dual electronic and physical ballots. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, no matter what system you have, you still can stuff the ballot box. You still can stuff the ballot box no matter what it is. Even if it's electronic, you can stuff electronically and then physically. You have to have adults running the show. As my old friend Cadaver used to say, who's, God bless him, he's passed away. He's with God now. But he said, you got to have adults in the room. And it's just true. We have to make sure that we get our churches and our people into the election counting. And we have to start working our way into the upper echelons of it as a nation. We've too long allowed the Dems to do that.
Yes.
The godless Dems to do that. Again, I have no problem with you if you're necessarily, blue dog Democrat, whatever. But the
Honesty and integrity.
honesty and integrity are gone in that party. Everyone. That's why we have everyone coming over. That's why we have the Tulsi Gabbards.
That's a great point.
Because they've realized that it's morally bankrupt. That's why they've come over. And so we need to make sure that right now we're winning those people over long term into the overarching conservative ideas, which ultimately root from a Judeo-Christian understanding of the Bible. That's really where we've got to go. So we've got to change our local elections by being present.
Get involved.
it's not hard to make sure that those ballot boxes aren't stuffed.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make sure you stand there and watch them.
Well,
in some cases, though, you've got
Been there,
to
done it.
you've got to be allowed to stand there. There are some states that are not allowing it.
Correct. And we're starting to work on that. But all of that comes down to the parties and the way that they have gripped the nation. So moving forward in Washington's farewell address, this is a dense address here, but it's really interesting. Without looking forward to an extremity of this kind, which nevertheless ought not to be entirely out of sight, the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. We should be focused on the nation less than our party, and it feels like it used to be that way. I'm not sure that it is. I don't know.
How can you be sure that is when you have Democrats coming out and saying, that this is the worst country in the world, and
It's like how
and
some
this
people are
is an
60,
oppressive.
70 years old and that are saying this crap. It's like, how did you go from 1960s, 1970s Joe Biden
Well, it's because
to this one?
it's people are not thinking for themselves. They're not doing their homework. They're not checking out what's being told to them by the news. They're thinking, the days of Walter Cronkite are over. They're gone.
Well, I think Joe Biden is a great case study in what can happen. A lot of people don't realize, I do, because I remember Joe Biden being elected to the Senate.
Yeah.
He's changed.
He was,
He
yeah.
radically changed.
He did. Yes,
He was
did.
not for some of the things that you saw him for in the last 4 years.
But he got entrenched.
But I think he got bought.
Well, that's
I think
what I
it's a
meant.
mix. It's a mix, right? Because I think you see some of these politicians like Schumer. I think he did progressively change with the times.
Yeah.
Because the times, there was money and incentive also
Yes,
there,
yes.
and that was very, very strong. That can change a lot of people, right? So I do believe that was part of the calculus for him. So
Money is a big attractor for some people.
Big motivator.
that it is.
Yes, big motivator.
That it is. And so, again, moving back to parties, again, in the cut here, I've lost track, but you know where we are. It serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration, the spirit of parties. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. It opens the doors to foreign influence and corruption, which finds a facilitated access to the government itself through the channels of party passions. Thus, the policy and the will of the country are subjected to the policy and will of another.
Did he speak that last week?
Right? And you look at BLM, you look at all of these movements. Antifa and BLM received massive amounts of donations, and I don't have the receipts with me. Someone in the chat could probably find that a lot of the people here on PSB are super up on this. You see a lot of mainland China and a lot of British aristocracy investment into a lot of the grassroots movements in America. It's almost like if you get a bunch of people rallied up into a faction, into a party, and if you fund them and you fund their their district attorneys and their judges and the the prosecutors, it's almost like you can have a sway and an influence in an election year. It's almost like maybe we should actually treat Soros type foundations as a national security threat.
Amen.
When they are obviously, you follow the money long enough, you start to see some of the old money in Europe paying in to the dissatisfaction of certain minority groups. By the way, dissatisfaction that's totally based off a lie. It's not even true. It's something that's being foisted upon them by the universities who are getting grants from some of these foreign entities who, some of them are allies, some of them are actual enemies like China. So again, receipts, don't have them right now. At some point I could provide them, but it is an interesting situation. And Washington was warning us about this very thing. Moving on. Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. But that jealousy to be useful must be impartial. Here's where he lays it out a little bit of philosophy here. Else it becomes the instrument of the very influence to be avoided, instead of a defense against it. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those whom they actuate to see danger only on one side and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Real patriots must resist the intrigues of the favorite, are liable to become suspect and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interests. Russia. I'm pro-Russia. Ukraine. I'm pro-Ukraine. I'm going to offend some people in this room. Israel. I love Israel. They have a right to exist. I think they're amazing. I think there have been some things that have been done that maybe aren't good. I think the Biden administration funded millions and millions of dollars that probably did not go to the war in Gaza in the right place. It probably went to Hamas. In a lot of these cases, it went to Hamas. You can say, no matter which country it is, we need to be clear that the favorite, like, maybe you like Israel. Maybe you want Israel to win. Maybe you're like me. I like Israel. I want them to win. I also have questions about some of the things that they've done in the past few years, right? I can hold both of those in my mind. I think they have a right to exist. I don't think the ethnic cleansing of Israel is just. Also, I'm not a big fan of, 8 hours for response for October 7th. What was that? What's going on there? There are questions to be asked. You can hold those two things in your head at the same time and also say, wait a minute, did all that money get to Israel? Did all that money get to the Ukraine? It's almost like these nations have hold and sway because they have certain people in parties and factions and special interests, and then the money doesn't even go to where we spent it. It doesn't even go there. And we see that today.
I think
And
the
you
one
go,
thing, go ahead, Steve.
where is it going?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Maybe we need to get somebody
You mean accountability?
look and see where it's going.
Do you mean like the normal businesses of today have accountability to the government? Do you think the government should have accountability to the people? You mean when you give a check to somebody, they have to prove that it's going? You know, when you get a grant from the government, you have to prove where that money's going.
That's true.
You know,
I think the
did
That'd
somebody?
be kind of like us granting our tax dollars to the government. Maybe they ought to show
What they're doing
where
with
it's
it.
going, huh?
Every agency in the government should be audited, not by the party in charge, an independent person. I'm all for Elon Musk, but he's not going to come out and protect. You know, it's not Republicans they're going to be protecting here. So I'm all for auditing. I'm all for transparency. I want to know where all this USAID money's going. I want to know where the money in the Defense Department's going. I want to know what the IRS is doing. You know, I had this statement was made this week on Facebook. You can't run a country like a business. Excuse me?
It literally is a corporation, and that's its own problem. And we could talk about that at some time. We'll have to chat about it because
It'd be a good conversation.
the monster
wouldn't
of Jekyll Island, and the reason our system is run the way it is, the amendments that were made to our Constitution, which, by the way, I mean, Trump is kind of tickling and toying with the idea. Be careful, Mr. President. You might lose your life if you try to repeal the income tax. I kind of hope you do, but be careful. Stay alive. We need you alive, Mr. President. I do think we need to audit the IRS. We need to check all of that out. And if he can roll back, I'd be very happy. Anyway.
There's a lot of auditing that needs to go on.
But it's almost like Washington kind of saw
Oh, he
some of this
did.
coming. It's almost like it's a serious question. I mean, it's almost like maybe he saw some of this in his own.
don't you think the Sonny Hostins and the Joy Behars and the Joy Reeds should do a little history reading?
It'd be nice if they did, but
Start with Washington.
they were probably robbed of that in school because of the Department of Education, which another
think
one of our
maybe
favorite
they've-
punching bags.
Failed history.
No, I think they have.
I think they were given a bad history.
Yes, and not only that,
I know.
I think what's really disheartening is I don't think they have an interest in understanding what it really was.
Correct.
That's a thing that really hurts. I mean, we can all be
You are
taught wrong
exactly
things.
right, Charlie.
Yeah, we can all learn wrong things. But at the end of the day, do we have a desire to know truth? And if we do and make that move, I can give an awful lot of grace. If Joy Reid came out today and said, you know what, I've really screwed up on how this country was started and whatnot. No, I don't agree with this and this and this, but I'm going to go back and do a little bit on my part. I can give a little bit of grace there.
Yep.
But
We got to see the aha moment. And
That's right.
And say, oh, you actually changed. You actually have a real reason.
You know,
and do I think she's going to do that? No.
No, I don't.
But my point is, I can give grace to somebody that's searching for truth.
well, and here's the problem. George Washington was an amazing person, very intelligent, had very clear understanding of what was happening in the day and what could happen in the future. Benjamin Franklin said, here's your republic.
If you can keep
if
it.
you can keep it. I see it's probably good for about 200 years, and then you'll because he
You'll have some
understood
problems.
human nature. But what we've gotten to today, which was not when you and I were kids, is that George Washington was a great man, but because he owned slaves. then we discount everything else he did. And so, do I believe in slavery? I think it was horrible. That's a terrible, horrible mark on our country. I just can't stand it. But it's not just our country. Every country practiced some sort of oppression against either another tribe or another people. And they may have been of the same color, but they still oppressed them.
But look at the movement away from it.
Yes.
Even in England. I mean, who was our guy there?
Starts with a W.
It is a W, and I can't remember. But he
worked for 15 years.
Yes, a long time till his dying day. And when I say dying day, I'm really not kidding. The law was passed in England, and it was only mere hours after that, and he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
it was his life work, and it was also. Oh, I wish I could remember the song, but it was one of the ship's captain that would bring the slaves over to England, and he repented, and how grieved he was. How could I do that to other human beings? God got a hold of his heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
William Wilberforce.
There we go.
He died the day before it was implemented.
That's right.
The day before. Right. So we'll discount these men just because they were men of their time and they struggled with this issue. But Washington also, just to pull us all back in, Washington also had a strategy. And this is where I said Trump is very Washingtonian. He's very Washingtonian in the way that he's dealing with the Russo-Ukraine conflict. I think this is phenomenal. And I was reading this in preparation this week, and I was kind of following the news with Washington's trade deal with the Ukraine that he wishes to propose. Read this and tell me if you see the similarity. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. So far as we have already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here, let us stop. Europe has a set of primary interests which to us have none or a very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics or the ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships and enmities. Next one, real quick, Mr. Producer, we're going to wrap this section up. It is our one true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it, for let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private. Therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense. But in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them. This is the isolationist George Washington. This is the isolationist George Washington. And you know what? He's not wrong. The Russo-Ukraine war, we're going to get to that, actually. And this is the next segment here. The Russo-Ukraine war has been going on for quite a bit. And Trump has had the temerity to say, well, we've spent $350 billion. You have $500 million worth, or $500 billion rather, worth of natural resources. So you say. We don't know. Actually, that's in doubt. But give us exclusive access. We'll develop, we'll split it 50-50, and you go your own way. And Trump has laid out, Mr. Art of the Deal himself has laid it out. But Zelensky sort of had a certain reaction to this. And he didn't take the suggestion very well.
He didn't take it well.
Mr. Producer, we have access to that. Oh, sorry. That was the wrong clip. Mr. Producer, actually, it was more self-destructive than that. Next clip. No. Wrong clip, or some would say right clip. Next one.
Якщо хтось хоче мене поміняти прямо зараз, то прямо зараз ніяк не вийде. Я би так сказав. Друга історія, раз вже говоримо про 4%, ми бачили цю дезінформацію, ми розуміємо, що вона йде
For those on audio only,
від
this is
Росії.
disinformation.
Ми розуміємо це,
We
і у
understand
нас
that we
є
have
доказ,
proof of these numbers being discussed
що,
between America and Russia.
Ці цифри, вони обговорюються між Америкою і Росією.
So unfortunately,
Тобто,
President
на жаль,
Trump,
Президент Трамп,
who we have respect a lot as a leader, but of the nation that we respect, but the American nation who has supported us all this time. Unfortunately, he lives in this disinformation space. I believe the United States has helped Putin to come out of years of isolation. Okay, thank you, Mr. Producer.
Yeah, there might be some truth to that, but it wasn't Trump that did it.
So I want to hear Trump's response to this. So go ahead and play that, Mr. Producer.
He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. Every city is being demolished. They look like a demolition site, every single one of them. And the only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle. He played him like a fiddle. That's an expression we use, yes, sir, to say that he's pretty easy.
I love Trump.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast.
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating.
He refuses to have elections.
Yeah, that 4% kind of sucks.
Now, you know what? Do you think that's true?
4% don't know. It's hard to know exactly what polls to believe because there's a lot of variance. But Trump is reading a specific, supposedly Ukrainian poll on Zelensky's approval rating.
But that's not the issue. Trump is the master orator and master negotiator.
He is.
He's just spouting off 4% to make him look really bad. And at the end of the day, why is he spouting that? He's spouting that from a negotiation point of view.
Well,
That's really all he's doing.
Remember, Trump is like a drunken fist kung fu practitioner.
Yep.
You know, where he kind of moves and he does these jives and they look insane. And part of the reason why Trump is taken seriously is because he doesn't take anything seriously as far as presenting himself as the statesman. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
He says whatever he wants to say, comes off. He goes, you know what? Maybe one day I'll be your friend. Maybe next day I'll call you Rocket Man, say I have a bigger button than you. Maybe next day I'll use it. You know, that's Trump's strategy. And I remember in 2017, 2018, whenever that was with Kim Jong-un, I was watching that and saying, what is the president doing?
That's different.
I'm concerned. Like his activity, I was laughing, but there was also a part of me that said, where are you going with this? But
if we
let
only
the man
knew.
cook.
Yeah.
Let the man cook. That's all I got to say. Let him cook.
You know, I do want to say this, is that Trump was rebuking the countries in Europe for not contributing more to the protection of Ukraine because they're going to be affected by it more than we are.
Mm-hmm.
So Trump says that. And do you know, I read that all of a sudden, some of those countries poured in some support.
Correct. You're seeing a massive increase. The only nation that has actually spent its share, other than the United States, is Poland on the UN or on NATO.
Okay,
rather.
So here's a couple of questions about Ukraine. Okay, here's my observation. One about the mineral rights.
Yep.
If the United States takes half the rights to their minerals, their natural minerals, Russia, if they come against Ukraine and want those mineral rights, they're also coming against the United States. So in a sense, it's protection for the Ukraine in...
What did Washington say? It's best to have an economic and not a political tie.
Correct. So you have to look at that. Now, here's another question for you, because everybody's mad at President Trump with Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't Ukraine part of NATO?
That's a great question, and there is a historical answer to it.
Okay.
Because when the Ukraine, not Ukraine, when the Ukraine was ceded, part of the settlement in the 90s was that the Ukraine, a territory, would not become a part of NATO during the dissolution of the Iron Curtain in the former Soviet Union. So that's an important part of the puzzle because they were warring over that space. This has been a battle ever since the fall of the USSR, and there have been concerns over the ownership of this space for 30 years. This has been a battle, and it has been a hot war. Actually, it's important to remember that Russia and Ukraine, they've been contesting this border for years. Next cut, Mr. Producer, if you could pull that up. This is something that I think people just seem to memory hole. Zelensky was meeting in a summit in 2019, and people were worried that he was falling into a trap. Now, 9 months after Zelensky's inauguration and 2 months after his first Normandy 4 summit, which brings together Germany, France, Ukraine, and Russia to discuss the Donbass region, it appears more likely that his approach will lead Ukraine into a Russian trap. 2 months since the Normandy summit, the number of casualties has not declined. In the war that they were having with Russia, it is increasingly difficult for Zelensky to argue that disengagement by Ukraine's army from the contact line in 3 locations, which was a precondition of the December Normandy 4 meeting, is a way to achieve peace. Guys, this guy was fighting a war. And by the way, his political adversary, his also political predecessor, was fighting Russia this whole time. In the Donetsk region, that area has been contested since 2014. You know, the whole Crimea thing. This has been going on for a long time. Next cut. And it hasn't stopped. The amount of human rights issues, this is 2024, okay, when this article was published in the Russian news TASS. Russian news agency. Ukrainian troops were shelling Donetsk. This is Ukraine. While Zelensky was speaking at the UNSC Security Council. It was an intense shelling was being conducted at Donetsk on dwelling houses, on civilians. Late on Wednesday, Donetsk came under shelling by Ukrainian troops who fired 10 155 millimeter shells into a civilian region.
And they're doing this for?
Again,
to make a point.
They're going back after Russia. But here's the worst part of it. This has been happening. Kiev was shelling the Donbass region pre-Zelensky. This has been going on for years. The Ukraine, Kiev, has been killing civilians. Maybe not Zelensky so much, but his predecessor, absolutely. They were shelling civilians way back in the mid-teens. This is a war that's been going on for a long time, and it was an internal war. I'm not a Putin fan, but I will say this. Those people they claim to be ethnically Russian. That's a whole debate on its own. The Bible says, like a man who seizes a barking dog by the ears is a man who involves himself in another fight. There's a lot of reasons that we could provide a strong response, but Biden invited this.
Yep.
Biden invited this when he said, I would not retaliate if Russia made a small incursion into the Ukraine.
That was a very idiotic statement to make.
So some of these things, this has been going on for a long time. And then Trump made the claim of dictator. Next cut, Mr. Producer. This is what he's speaking to right here. You actually have the current president Zelensky, after having shut down elections, he is persecuting his political opposition, making claims of high treason, things that happened a decade ago. People are saying that it's for political reasons because the election season is now at hand, effectively. Thank you, Mr. Producer. And again, do your own research. There's a lot of questions that I have. These are news articles that I'm pulling up. I don't know what to make of all of them, but I'm going to say something. You cancel elections, and then you're censuring or you're going after the other political party. Trump has been called a dictator for much, much, much less.
And
Maybe he just forgot what it meant because it's been thrown around so much in America, President Trump.
well, Trump did say martial law. I mean, and now I read an article where in Ukraine, you cannot have elections under martial law because you disenfranchise people from the country. They can't, the voting is going to be hindered. And so people aren't going to get out there.
But the question there becomes, why did you invoke martial law?
Well,
Is there a real security purpose to doing that?
It was the war. Was the response martial law for the war? And because they do have a Russian invader, but then why are you pursuing the opposition party?
Well, but here I would ask this: if we were at war with another country, are we going to impose martial law in the United States?
Is it on our soil? Yes.
Do other
That would be
countries have
standard.
to let anybody know why they impose martial law? I mean,
It's true.
It's true, but I guess what we're trying to examine here is the motives. So if he's so popular, as if which he's saying that he is, why does he have to go after his opposition? That's number one. Why would
Correct.
you have to do that?
Stop
You're popular.
elections.
You don't
Right.
need to. If what Trump is saying is that you're very low in popularity, then your opposition is a threat to you. But if
Correct.
you are, in one article I said that they're saying has a 57% approval rating.
Which is a high wartime approval
It's a
rating, if
very
true.
high. It's very high. You're not threatened by the opposition.
So again,
But if you have 4%,
it's
you
a
are-
question. And again, Trump uses hyperbolic language. I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to whine about it either. It's Trump. It's who we elected. It's what he does. I'm
But
not going to.
it's a negotiating piece
think
too.
it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. And so they someone said this in the chat, rigged voting in the Ukraine. Yeah, that there's been a lot of talk of that. I don't have direct knowledge of that, but it's a question mark, right? Especially when you have a wartime on where you're actually, pursuing your opposition, that it breeds questions. That's all I'm saying.
I
It
think the
breeds
longer
questions.
this goes on, it hurts Zelensky more than it does Putin.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
For
yeah.
sure.
And so Trump is right. He should be interested in getting it done
Yep.
quickly.
Yep.
Now, once again, moving on from this one, we have a fun one. Margaret Brennan has had a bad month. After a interview with J.D. Vance, I don't care, Margaret, iconic, I don't care, Margaret. She had an interview with Rubio. This is after J.D. Vance's speech in Brussels, I believe, where he said, look, you guys need to open up your free speech. Firewalls against conservative parties are not good. Locking down your free speech. This is where this happened last time. This is not good. We're in Germany. Free speech is an important part of our ability to hold a democracy. He used that word. And this interview between Marco Rubio and insane cat lady Margaret went down. Let's go ahead and watch it.
I thought it was actually a pretty historic speech, whether you agree with him or not. I think the valid points he's making to Europe is we are concerned that the true values that we share, the values that bind us together with Europe, are things like free speech and democracy and our shared history in winning 2 world wars and defeating Soviet communism and the like. These are the values that we shared in common. And in that Cold War, we fought against things like censorship and oppression and so forth. And when you see backsliding and you raise that, that's a very valid concern. We can't tell them how to run their countries. He simply expressed in a speech his view of it, which a lot of people frankly share. And I thought he said a lot of things in that speech that needed to be said. And honestly, I don't know why anybody would be upset about it. People are allowed, you don't have to agree with someone's speech. I happen to agree with a lot of what he said, but you don't have to agree with someone's speech to at least appreciate the fact they have a right to say it, and that you should listen to it and see whether those criticisms are valid. I assure you, the United States has come under withering criticism on many occasions from many leaders in Europe, and we don't go around throwing temper tantrums about it.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship
well, I have to disagree with
was
you.
specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history. I also think it's wrong. Again, I go back to the point of his speech. Okay, the point of his speech was basically that there is an erosion in free speech and intolerance for opposing points of view within Europe, and that's of concern because that is eroding. That's not an erosion of your military capabilities. That's not an erosion of your economic standing. That's an erosion of the actual values that bind us together in this transatlantic union that everybody talks about.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
I think
Producer.
allies and friends and partners that have worked.
Go watch the whole thing. And by the way, you can always find this show. Someone was asking, you can't find the show at Further Every Day on Rumble, on YouTube, and anywhere podcasts are found. You'll find a link in the description for all of our sources and our references, this included. Go watch the whole interview. Marco Rubio masterfully nailed that. And he waited. He waited for her to give herself a full noose to hang herself with because, okay, first off, there was no opposition party. Hitler literally removed it by weaponizing the Department of Justice equivalent. The Reichstag fire was used as an excuse to round up more people. Nothing she said made sense.
No,
and that's where an amazing apologetic comes in. Again, apologetics, having a written or a formal defense for why you believe what you believe. Again, that's what this channel is about. Having a cultural apologetic, a political apologetic is a phenomenal tool. He says, no, there was no free speech. And if you look at Germany, you actually, the more people talk about Adolf Hitler, it just seems like so many of these people, they really,
they don't know.
They didn't actually study World War II. They really didn't study any of this, or they're lying.
And you know, the brown shirts that he had were just, I mean, they went against their own people.
Mm-hmm.
They were going against their own people, man.
Yep. And so that was a fantastic takedown. I just wanted to share that with y'all.
I think it was really good. I love the fact that Rubio, there was no hesitation. Once he got started on that, it was like,
boom,
here we go. You really, it just opened up a floodgate. It acted like it was sitting there seething, ready to pounce, and he got the opportunity. And I thought he did it with great respect to Margaret. I mean,
he was much less ad hominem like than I would have been.
He could have really.
Margaret presented herself as if she had no respect for her audience, or she feels like her audience was uneducated, and she could say whatever she wanted to, and they would accept it. That is not respecting your audience. That is not doing your homework, presenting yourself as a truthful, reliable, dependable journalist.
And that's why people are moving away from those media outlets.
Yeah, and I think that we need to see more of that, and hopefully we are all better prepared and sharpened to do that.
Yeah, their history is so dishonest.
Yeah, it's rewritten.
But it's why you have to know. You have to know. Someone asked me one time, "Why do you do apologetics? Like, what's the point? Like, I don't want to argue with people. I don't want to do this." It's so that when someone says something that's not true, when the lies of Satan have come for you or your friends or your people, you're ready with a response. It's to be a sharp tool in God's hands. God does the work, but he uses the tools that make themselves available to him.
And can I add something there real quick? Because people do ask those questions.
Yeah.
And I'm stunned that they would ask them. Do you not think that the other side uses quote unquote apologetics for their point of view?
Yes.
They do. Every time, folks, that we walk into the marketplace, every time that we walk into the play place, every time that we walk into the workplace, and we're confronted with these kind of things, we have to be ready to give an answer of the hope which lies within us. That hope comes from truth. That's where it comes from.
Absolutely.
It's not to accept the lie. It's not to sit there and say, yeah, you're probably right. No, figure it out. Understand what truth is and stand on it.
Amen.
Well, and the Bible says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So when you are listening to Margaret and coming up with believing what she just said, you're entrapped in a lie.
Yep.
You're entrapped in a lie. That's why I said she has no respect for her audience.
So we need to be the truth, and we need to have those answers, because the fact is, Satan does not stop. The
That's
lies
right.
do not stop.
That's right.
Ever. It's ever present. Speaking about lies, and by the way, territory that we should not cede to the left, I got some pop culture news for y'all. So how many of y'all have watched Jesus Christ Superstar?
Oh, not me.
Have not watched it, and I will not.
Don't care.
Watched the original.
What did you think? It's a great musical on its musical face.
On its the original
1973 or 71, I forget.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That was back when I was,
The guy who plays Judas, what a pair of chords. What a pair of chords. But the thing is, Cynthia Erivo, bring this up, Mr. Producer, is now being cast as Jesus Christ in Jesus Christ Superstar. Now, thank you, Mr. Producer. Kadish Kareem, get that off my screen, as someone once said. Mr. Producer told me that one time. Thank you, Steve. We all empathize with that statement. Thank you, Senator Clinton. Anyway, we all agree.
feel better now.
It's not the fact that she's black. It's the fact that she's a she, although she does not identify as that. Now, Jesus Christ Superstar, I'm making a unpopular statement here. A lot of people, a lot of conservatives are going to say, well, I didn't care about that anyway. You know what? No. You know what? Even Jesus Christ Superstar, which I think treats Christ very flippantly, comes from a secular lens. He's just a man. He's just a man. God, why must I go through this? I'm unsure. I'm afraid. I have my doubts, says Jesus in the song that is supposed to represent the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay? Even that. You know what? I'm tired of letting institutions go away. No. Cynthia Erivo, get out. Get out. No, just no. I think we should start to say, you know what? Even that liberal, wishy-washy Christian crap, get out of that too. I don't want you near that. Now, don't get me wrong. I abhor that musical. There are a lot of Christians who became Christians shortly after watching that musical, and they grew, and it was like how Jesus reached out to them. So am I saying I like the musical because of that? No. Do I think we should cede any territory? Also,
No.
Cynthia Erivo, I think the public outburst and the backlash against her needs to stay. I think conservatives' tendency to say, hey, you know what? It's just this liberal thing. No, I don't give it to you, libs. No, you can't even take that. No, everyone needs to talk about it. They need to boycott it. If you like Jesus Christ Superstar, God bless you. Don't go watch it. Boycott this lady. This is sick. And yes, it matters. Some people say, well, does it really matter? Does it really matter? Because Jesus was, in us all. It's like, yeah, it matters. You know why? Not because it's a woman, not because she's black. Jesus probably looked more like Ben Shapiro and less like Cynthia Erivo. But you know what? None of that matters to me. It's the disrespect. It's the pure, sheer disrespect of the treatment of Jesus Christ that bothers me in any shape or form. Don't care.
Agreed.
Don't like it. I think it matters, and I don't want her playing that role. So I boycott her. I wasn't going to see it anyway, but now I especially will tell everyone I do not think she should be there. And I think you guys should too. I think we should actually, say, hey, we don't like this.
If I remember correctly, Jesus was a guy.
Moving on to the next perversion
If
of
I'm
the
not
church.
mistaken.
Jesus was a guy.
I'm standing on a political hill here now.
I want to play this cut from
Hey, Charlie.
I want to play this cut from SNL 50, and you guys are going to know what we're going to play, and I want to have an apologetic for this. So, guys, listen to this. So, the inference for those who need the joke, explained to you, is that white people who support Trump don't like black people, and they're uncomfortable around black people. I think it's long time that we say, look, you know what? Jokes have to have a modicum of truth in them. They have to have a sliver of truth to be funny. Like if you say, I walked outside and the sky was green and purple. Well, there's no relevance. This is absolutely irrelevant. There's no building for the joke. It's just normally you have a setup, you have a punchline, right? And then you have the laugh, right? So there's the setup is not there. It's just, oh, the punchline is you, MAGA supporter. You're the punchline. If you're watching SNL, you're the punchline. If you supported Trump, if you voted for Trump, maybe there are, like, I don't know, 20 racist MAGA Republicans. They probably do exist. They're probably all, attending Westboro Baptist Church and are related to their cousins. But you have a few. But painting the entirety of the MAGA movement, by the way, the majority of the country, as the joke. No setup. You're the punchline. You're the punchline. It's sad. I think it's harmful.
I have no. I don't know why we support Hollywood.
Here's the deal: is Tom Hanks has been a very popular actor, and he does very well. He does very well. But he just made fun of half of the people in the country that supported his movies. He made money off of these people, and he doesn't even have the respect or the audacity to show respect in turn. Let me just say something to you Hollywood people. We like it when you read a script and you do really well. We don't care about your opinions. I don't care what your political outlets are, your outlook on life. I don't care. Read a script, do your money or do your movie, and we will enjoy it. Otherwise, just shut up.
Yeah.
Just be quiet.
Or you have the freedom to express that, in which we have the freedom to boycott it.
And
That's
we can
right.
leave.
Right.
So here's my thing. I think I don't mind a joke about racist white people. I really don't. But there has to be a setup. If there's no setup, the setup is all Americans who voted for Trump are white and racist. Therefore, punchline, come in Tom Hanks. And that's the problem. People say it's just a joke. It's like, well, yeah, it is a joke. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy a lot of the comedy from Chappelle and from I'm forgetting Chris Rock. Their older comedy was really good, and they made a lot of fun of white people. I could laugh my butt off because there was a setup, and I wasn't the punchline because of my identity as having white skin. The joke was centric to the specific white person and black person in the setup, and the joke, the punchline, was relevant to those circumstances. I can laugh at that. And my friends, my coworkers, we tease each other all the time on the basis of race. That's natural, especially when you're working in a blue collar scenario. That's natural. That's normal. We can have those jokes. But when the setup is you're a Christian conservative who voted for Trump, and you believe that everything would be better if we all just went to church, and that's you, then you're the punchline. That's the thing that got me.
You know, it's interesting because I didn't become a Christian till I was 48. I've traveled some very interesting places throughout this country. Some really bad places and some really fine places through this country. I mean, to the dregs of society and to the heights of society. And to tell you something, what Tom Hanks was making fun of and the way he was acting is absurd. I've met a lot of people, and the way he was acting towards that person, I have never seen. And I have run into all kinds of people. And I've run into a lot of racist people.
It's
and they've
unnatural.
never acted like, even racist people don't act like that.
It's so unnatural that's a different kind. I mean, even I've known folks who said, oh, we shouldn't be interbreeding, we shouldn't be intermarrying, but they always treated, like, to their face, they were always significantly more respectful than what you saw. What you saw was a huge disdain. That's what they believe we feel for them because they feel it for us. And that's the thing that just gets me offset. So I think it's important to be able to vocalize and to express why we have an issue. And I think I reject your premise. I reject your premise. I'm not racist. I just don't like your policies. So NIH lied. Monkeys died or got transed. Did y'all hear about that this week?
Yep.
Yep.
The moment that Fauci stepped on the scene, I was uneasy. And oh my goodness.
Mr. Producer?
Every time he comes up or his name gets brought up in the news, I cringe.
Yeah.
Speaking of, here's why. Close. I cringe at that too.
Good afternoon.
This is Nancy
Late
Mace.
last year, the White Coat Waste Project exposed more than $10 million in taxpayer funds that were spent creating transgender mice, rats, and monkeys. These DEI grants funded painful and deadly transgender experiments that forced lab animals to undergo invasive surgeries and hormone therapies at universities across the country. For example, the Biden-Harris administration spent $2.5 million taxpayer dollars to study the fertility of transgender mice.
Huh?
Let that sink in. We spent over $2 million studying the fertility of transgender mice. $1.1 million was spent to find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapies to mimic transgender men were more likely to overdose on a party drug, commonly used in the LGBTQ community to induce drug-fueled what's called, quote, chemsex. I asked my staff what was chemsex and the chemical, and I guess it's something called GHB, which is a date rape drug, and also a drug that's used recreationally. So we spent over $1 million to find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapy were more likely to overdose on a date rape drug. Like, that's what your taxpayer dollars were being spent on. Federal funds were also used to forcibly transition male monkeys to see if hormone therapy made them more susceptible to HIV.
The look on Mr. Producer's face.
Now, I didn't know this until recently, but monkeys cannot be infected with HIV. Yet this federally funded experiment forced them to take hormone-altering drugs to study a virus they cannot have. The Biden-Harris administration was so eager to propagate their radical gender ideology across all facets of American society that they were surgically mutating animal genitals. Like, taxpayer money went to that. So my question is, were they castrating mice, castrating monkeys? Were they getting double mastectomies? The language that they use in many of these experiments were, quote, gender affirming care, which I learned about 3 years ago what that meant. I thought that was maybe just some hormones or something something like that. But apparently gender affirming care is actually surgical mutilation of genitals. And apparently it's not just humans, they're doing it too. We were doing it with taxpayer dollars to animals. It's well known that because of the differences between animal and human biology, animal testing frequently does not produce results relevant for humans. In fact, 90% of novel drugs that are successful in animal tests fail in human clinical trials. Today's scientific questions are so complex that we have well surpassed a time where it is useful or appropriate to rely on inhumane animal experiments to answer them. Recently developed technological tools can more accurately model human biology and identify solutions that are more useful for human patients. But it is often the federal bureaucracy that prevents these new technologies from being used. Instead of adequately investing in these innovative alternatives, the federal government has continued to funnel taxpayer dollars towards cruel animal experiments. Today, most of the 27 NIH institutes and centers conduct or support animal testing, as does the Food and Drug Administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defense, and countless other agencies. We have some beagle puppies here with us today. Beagle puppies have
Great optics.
gone through some of the worst medical experiments. I mean, drugging them with cocaine, having insects eat at them and their bodies so much until they die, drugging them until they die. These are God's creatures, and they're beautiful, and you can see them sitting in the front row today. So we thank the folks who are here and brought these beautiful beagle puppies here today. In fact, the U.S. government spends in excess of $20 billion a year conducting experiments on animals. The White Coat Waste Project found in 2021 that the NIH, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, a component of NIH at the time, ran by Dr. Fauci, spent $1.68 million force-feeding toxic drugs to beagle puppies between 6 and 8 months old before dissecting and killing them. The conversation we're having today is important. In 2022, due to public criticism lobbied against Fauci's NIAID by me and other members of Congress, another $1.8 million experiment to abuse beagle puppies in various drug tests was canceled. So I want to thank the work of White Coat Waste and everyone in the room today,
Thank you, Mr.
others
Producer.
who've been on the forefront of this fight.
Where's Elon and the chainsaw?
That is just the start of what they're uncovering. Someone in the chat said, well, it sounds like they're money laundering. No. A lot of this stuff is money laundering. They're supposedly, right now, at this exact moment, we understand that these tests actually happened. And so what are they doing? Are they wasting money? No, I don't think so. I really think that they're trying to build the ideology. And what I mean by that is look at Fauci. You look at his history. He all of a sudden changed, came in very strong. I'm not going to say changed direction, came in very strong that HIV was spread through water droplets, right? But the people who knew him and the people around him knew that he spent 10 days almost straight in a vacation in a gay bathhouse. So make of that what you will, but all of a sudden the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, remember Oprah said every straight heterosexual individual, like 1 out of 5 is going to be at risk for HIV. That came from Fauci. And you look at the fact that he owned and was working on patents for the vaccine, for the virus, and working on gain of function. What's he up to right now? Like seriously, what's he up to right now? As far as we can tell, allegedly, this guy might have been very well responsible for the whole COVID-19 pandemic, soup to nuts, vaccine and the cause of the virus, whether accidentally or intentionally, it seems pretty clear it was Fauci. What's he doing right now with transgender experiments with HIV, with animals? By the way, the gain of function part, you should be scared about that. You should be concerned that he's doing HIV testing on animals because he's already been involved in gain of function research with HIV. HIV, gain of function, monkeys. I'm not making any claims here, but I'm saying we better figure out what's happening right now. This should be an existential national security threat. But Steve,
you just said that about HIV with monkeys, but I thought monkeys couldn't get HIV.
That's a great question. So what are they testing? What all are they looking at? Everything that is documented is known that it's public. It's going to be potentially sometime in the future public access. So why? Why is all of that going on? I don't know, but we ought to know.
I was just going to say, I think we might be hearing a lot about Dr. Fauci in the next coming
what's
years
also interesting is that you remember we did the one podcast where we were talking about Fauci and all of his stuff and how they were using beagles in his experiment. And what was it that they were doing was some kind of insects or something. They were eating the beagles alive or something.
Oh, I don't
what
know.
was that? You remember that, Charlie? Where they were using the beagle?
Yes.
And it was Fauci that was doing that.
Correct. And so this stuff, by the way, I actually did some research. This information was available publicly in 2022. You don't hate the media enough. Like, seriously, however much you dislike the American mainstream media, we do not dislike them enough. And maybe the word hate is right, because what they are doing is insane. The fact that this has been published, it's been a public circulation since 2022. I beg your pardon? And by the way, again, the whole thing with the vaccine, I was on radio in 2020, in March of 2020, I was concerned about COVID. I was very, very, a lot, like many of us, I was very worried. By May of 2022, I was on radio saying, guys, Fauci was working in the lab in the same city where it was released. He owns the patents on the vaccine. And we're looking at a human animal vector. Like, that is public information that schmuck nobody right here could find just doing some general research and verified, not just from some rando site, from NIH. From NIH's website, not some dark hole, not some Substack thread, not some X or Twitter feed. No. On NIH.gov. You don't hate the media enough. And that's why we need to be ready, because they're stealing everything. And that's how the New World Order comes to power in the first place.
I was just thinking about something, John Arthur, when I hear what you're talking about with regards to COVID. I remember when AIDS started coming out and the instant fear that it put into everybody. And I'm not saying that the two are connected, but you can see that the response is very similar.
Correct.
Very similar.
You need to be awake, you need to be alert, and you need to be ready. Moving on to a happier topic. Okay. We go from beagles who died to a much more macabre topic, but this is Nikki Knows Facts.
Oh, my. Oh, my.
Who was Elmer McCurdy?
Oh, my.
Try to do this in 8 minutes.
Okay. Well, this is
marathon
the
bike.
most interesting story I've ever come across. So, Elmer J. McCurdy. He was born in January 1st, 1880. He died October 7th, 1911, but was never buried until April 22nd, 1977. Now, here's a story. He was born to a 17-year-old unwed mother, but he was raised by her brother and sister-in-law. By 1900, Elmer's mother, uncle, and grandfather all passed away, and he starts to drift around the United States. He can't hold a job. He becomes an alcoholic. Now, in 1907, he joins the United States Army, where he was trained to use nitroglycerin for demolition purposes. Nitroglycerin is what?
It's the primary ingredient in TNT.
That's right.
Primary.
After the Army, he's discharged in 1910. He takes up a life of crime. He becomes known as the most inept robber of all his time. Now, and here's why. In November 1910, he's arrested for possessing items to commit burglary. He has a chisel, he has a hacksaw, funnels for nitroglycerin, gunpowder, and money sacks. Okay, well, he was also in the Army. So he gets to court and he comes up with some story, and he is found not guilty.
Oh, my gosh.
But this did not deter him. He became more committed. So in March of 1911, he robs a train, and he uses nitroglycerin to try to get into the safe. The problem is he used too much. He melted the safe and the coins within. He only walked away with like $150, $500, something like that. But this did not deter him. He decided in September to rob a bank. And they spend 2 hours breaking through the bank wall with a hammer. Okay? Again, he takes up nitroglycerin, and he's going to use it on the vault door.
Yep.
Okay? And it explodes, and the vault goes flying through the bank and destroys the bank. But the safe is never touched. He walks out.
So he blows up the safe, and the safe flies away, but the door doesn't come off.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it destroys the inside of the bank. Okay, so it's utterly destroyed. Now, he gets another idea in in October. He decides he heard of a bank that was carrying $400,000 to take to the Osage Nation. And he thought, I'm going to rob this train. Not a bank, I'm sorry, it's a train. But he ended up jumping on a passenger train instead.
Oh my gosh. So he's on the wrong train.
Yes. He walks away with $46, a revolver, a coat, and 2 bottles of whiskey. He ends up going to a friend's barn to hide out where he's drinking the whiskey. He is tracked down by 3 deputy sheriffs, and a shootout occurs, and Elmer is killed.
And this is the farmhouse in which he was killed.
That's correct.
After drinking 2 bottles of whiskey.
So his body is taken to the local undertaker in Oklahoma. Now this should be the end of the story.
Yep.
Okay? This should be the end of the story, but it is not. The undertaker embalmed Elmer with an arsenic-based preservative. And this was done to preserve bodies for a long period of time until the next of kin were located. And the undertaker thought it's going to be a long time before anybody comes and claims Elmer. Now, he refused to bury the body because he wanted to get paid for his services.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes up with this idea that, you know what? I need to make some money. So he takes Elmer's body, puts it on display, and charges a nickel, and he labels it, "Come and see the bandit who wouldn't give up."
So it becomes a sideshow attraction, a freak show attraction,
Yes,
as a cadaver.
Yeah, and he ended up having people put nickels in his mouth. Just wrong on so many. Yeah.
It's disturbed. Okay, keep going.
However, this became a very popular thing and drew the attention of many carnival producers, okay? But the Undertaker received a lot of offers for this corpse, but he refused to sell it. Now, one day, now this is October 1916. He died in 1911. This is 5 years later.
Yep.
They're messing with this body for 5 years. This is just so wrong. One day, 2 men showed up claiming to be Elmer's brothers.
Just think how many nickels that guy's
Oh, my
collected
God.
over
Just-
5
Yeah.
years, man.
They claimed to be his brothers and they claimed the body. However, they really were James and Charles Patterson, the owners of the Great Patterson Carnival Show. So now Elmer's going on the road.
Again.
Okay, he's
I'm
first
on-
featured in the
on
James
road
Carnival.
again.
I know.
Just can't wait. To
And
get on
then
the road again.
he is in the Patterson Carnival until 1922, and he's labeled the outlaw who would never be captured alive. In 1928, Louis Sony buys Patterson's operation and features Elmer in the Traveling Museum of Crime. In 1928, there's an official sideshow accompanied the Trans-American Foot Race, and Elmer's corpse was part of it. I mean, this is
At
crazy.
1928 from
Yes!
From
The 1800s.
1911.
Yes.
Oh,
Hold on.
Excuse me.
Elmer was
Correct.
acquired by director Dwayne Esper in 1933 to help promote his exploitation film Narcotic. Now, at this time, Elmer's body had become mummified. And there was a picture of that, but I'm not putting it out there. It was just so gross. Now, in 1949, Elmer's body is placed in storage. Now, between this time that he was purchased, people kind of forgot that this was a real body. They really thought it was a mannequin. And by the way, they actually put wax on him and painted and all kinds of stuff. It was just crazy. So, then in 1976, December 1976, the production crew of the series $6 Million Man, Steve, I bet you watched that show.
oh man, you bet.
They were filming scenes for the Carnival of Spies. And it was an episode at what's called the Pike, which is a carnival fun place in California. A prop man
Put it up.
moved what he thought was a mannequin, but the arm broke off.
No way. Don't tell me.
And he saw bone inside the arm and realized this is not a mannequin. This is a human corpse.
No way. In 76.
77.
Get out of
76,
town.
yes. So the police in the corner are called, and they did an autopsy. By the way, they didn't find the bullet in his chest, but they found the what is it? The casing.
casing
Yeah, they
him.
found and they did research, and they found out this was Elmer McCurdy. I guess there had been stories, throughout history on this stuff. So they finally took him back to Guthrie, Oklahoma, and buried him on April 22nd, 1977. And by the way, they placed 2 feet of concrete over his casket so no one could dig him up. This poor man.
Oh my gosh! So
Wow, that's something else.
that
It's a
is
$6
the
million
ballad,
man.
the ballad of Elmer McCurdy.
Miss Nikki, how'd you find this story?
I wonder if he collected $6 million in nickels.
Oh, I have no idea. But the poor, by the way, the corpse only weighed 53 pounds
By that time.
by that time. I just cannot imagine.
Wow.
I just can't imagine.
That's something else. I
So-
think I remember watching that episode.
$6 million man. That was a favorite of my parents.
Oh, man, that was a great show.
It was.
yeah.
Lightning round. We went a little bit deep on the Washington papers, but I think it was the Washington Farewell Address. But I think we needed to. The book corner. Let's lightning round this.
Yep.
So, the book corner, we're talking about the Great Divorce. If you're following along, chapters 3 and 4 this week, next week, 5 and 6. Overview, just going to read that over one more time. C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce is an allegorical representation of a type of heaven and hell or purgatory, as they might be if the final judgment was not final. If parole was available and God allowed the dissidents of hell to holiday on the edges of heaven, seeing the beauty and majesty, would they be wooed by the angelic and glorified representatives of heaven calling out to them? So we read chapter 3 this week. Any thoughts on chapter 3?
Well, Charlie and I have been listening to this together.
Yes.
And so, and you know, I was listening to the one part and where they get there and the woman gets off the bus and she's so overwhelmed. She just runs back to the bus.
Yes.
She just ran and she didn't come back out. So I thought that was, you know.
And we'll get to that one in just a second. We'll
Yeah.
actually read that part.
Yeah, I didn't have much on chapter 3. Chapter 4 is what caught my...
Chapter 4 is
Yeah.
interesting. So, Steve, any thoughts on 3? Because 3 is really just the setup of what heaven is.
Yep.
Yeah, and what I thought was really interesting was the realization of the narrator realizing that he was just like all the other people. He
had
could
that.
see through his feet and see the grass. It was like, oh, wow.
So for those who have not read it, let me go ahead and give you a quick summary of chapter 3. As the bus arrives in heaven, again, if you didn't join us last week, these are dissidents from purgatory or hell in C.S. Lewis's allegory. As they are coming up for holiday at the edges of heaven, the passengers from purgatory fight to get off first. You can go and throw up that cut, Mr. Producer. However, the very blades of grass cut their feet. The narrator attempts to lift the smallest of leaves off of the ground and harms himself by doing so. It says it cut like diamonds. He notices that the passengers appear like ghosts, but upon further introspection, they look as they always have. But upon the surrounding fields, rivers, and mountains, simply everything appears to be more real than anything he's ever seen before, making these ghosts appear as they really are. Just to read a clip here from the narrator. At first, of course, my attention was caught by my fellow passengers, who were still grouped about in the neighborhood of the omnibus. Though beginning, some of them, to walk forward into the landscape with hesitating steps, I gasped when I saw them. Now that they were in the light, they were transparent, fully transparent, when they stood between me and it, smudgy and imperfectly opaque when they stood in the shadow of some tree. They were, in fact, ghosts, man-shaped stains on the brightness of that air. One could attend to them or ignore them at will, as you do with the dirt on a window pane. I noticed the grass did not bend under their feet, or even the dew drops were not disturbed. What Lewis is laying out here is he's laying out that heaven is reality. Heaven is what is really real. It is more real than the people that you and I meet every day. It is more true. And everything that you see on this earth is merely a vague, a faint representation of that which is to come. Let's read, we'll read one more excerpt, and then I think we're going to do final thoughts for the day. We will revisit 4. So if you're behind on 3 and 4 of The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, you can catch up with us.
You really want to read it.
4 is phenomenal and interesting, and it's the way Lewis writes. I'll get to that in a moment. But for now, the next slide, Mr. Producer. The narrator then goes on to say, then after some readjustment of the mind or some focusing of my eyes took place, I saw the whole phenomenon the other way around. The men were as they always had been, as all men I had known had been, perhaps. It was the light, the grass, the trees that were different, made of some different substance, so much solider than the things in our country, that men were ghosts by comparison. Moved by a sudden thought, I bent down and tried to pluck a daisy which was growing at my feet. The stalk wouldn't break. I tried to twist it, but it wouldn't twist. I tugged till all the sweat stood out on my forehead, and I had lost most of the skin off of my hands. The little flower was hard, not like wood or even iron. Next slide, Mr. Producer. One of the ghosts has this reaction. I don't like it. I don't like it. Go ahead and throw that up, Mr. Producer. You got this. I don't like it. I don't like it, screamed the voice. It gives me the pip. The narrator goes on to say, one of the ghosts had darted past me back under the bus. She had never come out of it again, as far as I know. What's Lewis trying to articulate here? Faced with the reality of heaven, there are people who aren't even going to desire to stay. The change, the amount of reality. And we see that in our world today. And so I really wanted to get to 4, but I don't want to get into Mr. Happel's time. But I'll say this. We are living in this shadow of reality. God is the author of reality, but he's also the source of truth. You could say the source of reality, as a light bulb is the source of the light in a room. God is the reality. And one of the biggest qualms I've had with heaven versus hell, and Charlie knows this, I have mulled over this. This has been something that I have thought about for years and years and years. How can a good God allow for a hell? I think next week, when we delve into The Great Divorce, chapter 4, we're going to see a little bit of an articulation of why that great divorce between heaven and hell does occur. In the meantime, 30 seconds. Final thoughts for the day, Miss Nikki.
I was going to say that George Washington, he walked through the war, the Revolutionary War, and then he was president for 2 terms. I don't think anybody had lived and desired for our country more than George Washington.
Agreed, Charlie.
I don't think we should fall down and worship George Washington, but we all owe a great debt of gratitude to him for what he was able to do in the early years of our nation.
You know, I think reading the C.S. Lewis book shows that there are too many people in this world that are too comfortable in their sin, and that people need to step up and look at God and bring Jesus into their lives and repent of their sins and live towards Jesus.
Amen.
And make that life a whole much better life.
Well stated.
Amen. I've said it for several weeks now. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but reality, people want it. People want orthodoxy. People want truth. Now, I'm not speaking about specifically the Orthodox Church. I'm a lower church member, as some of those folks would say. That's okay. Look, truth is desirable for those who are looking. Let's be about speaking that truth in love, in sincerity, and with vigor. And I think we in America yet have a chance to make a difference for truth. And remember, truth has a name. He came to bear witness to himself.
Amen.
And when he stood in front of Pilate and said, I come to bear witness to the truth, Pilate says, what is truth? Truth was standing before him. With that, we love you so much. Thank you.